Have you ever asked yourself, as I grow older, what truly matters most? Is it a comfortable bank account, cozy home, or having loving children by your side? Or could it be that all these things fade into the background compared to a simpler wish to live a peaceful, worry-free life filled with ease? Picture aging parents with hunched backs, cloudy eyes, and weary hearts, still fretting over the lives of their children. These are people who have spent their entire lives toiling, saving every penny for a better tomorrow, only to face a challenging truth in their later years: how to safeguard their retirement savings without straining family relationships. And when their health inevitably declines, who will truly care for them? Join me on a journey of heartfelt stories to uncover the importance of self-reliance, gratitude, and self-love. Perhaps, along the way, you'll discover the answers to some of your own questions. The story of Mr. Taylor, the wisdom of managing retirement funds. When people think of Mr. Taylor, they imagine a man with snow-white hair and a calm, steady gaze that reflects a lifetime of wisdom. At 75 years old, Mr. Taylor is no longer young, but every step he takes and every decision he makes exudes a sense of serenity, as if he's discovered a secret formula for living peacefully in his golden years. Unlike many of his peers, Mr. Taylor doesn't hastily entrust his retirement savings to anyone, not even his children. A common practice among elderly parents as a gesture of trust, or sometimes out of a sense of having no other choice. Mr. Taylor often recounts how, during his younger years, he and his wife worked tirelessly, not only to build a home, but also to save every penny for a future where they wouldn't have to depend on anyone. Their hard work paid off, and they managed to build a comfortable nest egg. However, what makes Mr. Taylor truly unique is how he manages that money. Instead of handing over his entire savings to his children, he chooses to oversee it himself. Every dollar and cent is carefully accounted for. The larger sums are securely placed in the bank with clear plans, while a portion is invested in a rental property that provides him with steady monthly income. One day, while sitting on his porch, Mr. Taylor shared, "Some people call me selfish for keeping my money and not giving it to my children. But I believe that as seniors, we must understand that this money isn't just an asset. It's a ticket to our own peace of mind. If we don't protect it ourselves, who will?" His words resonate like a wake-up call. It's not that Mr. Taylor doesn't trust his children. He has 3 grown children, all with families of their own. But he understands that even the most loving children might unintentionally create misunderstandings or disputes if the entire responsibility of managing the money fell on one of them. More importantly, he recognizes that losing control over his finances would diminish his own independence. To prevent this, Mr. Taylor made a bold decision. He wrote a detailed will. Every asset, every dollar, and every cherished item is clearly allocated to each child. In the will, he also outlined specific instructions for handling his estate in case of an unexpected passing. "I want everything to be transparent," he said with a gentle smile, "so my kids don't have to argue, and I don't have to worry." When someone once asked him, "What if you fall seriously ill? Who will take care of you?" he simply smiled and replied, "I'm not afraid to pay for help. That way, I don't burden my kids, and they won't feel the weight of responsibility for me. The money I earned is for my care, not to create pressure for anyone." Indeed, Mr. Taylor's independence shines not just in his financial management, but also in how he defines his relationship with his children. One built on respect, free from dependence, yet always warm. When asked whether he ever regrets his choices, Mr. Taylor looked out at the horizon, where the golden light of sunset bathed the fields, and replied, "No, I don't regret it, but I do remind myself to live meaningfully every day. Perhaps that's the greatest gift I can leave my children." Mr. Taylor's story is not just a lesson in financial management. It's a powerful reminder of the value of independence. He has shown that, while age may weaken the body, a free spirit and a clear mind can still help us take charge of our lives. In every decision he makes, We see the wisdom forged through years of experience. His story teaches us all, no matter our age, to protect ourselves and cherish our independence. Only then can we truly find peace. The story of Mrs. Harper redefining happiness in old age. As the soft glow of twilight touched her wrinkled face, Mrs. Harper's sparkling eyes reflected not just the passage of time, but a deep awakening after decades spent living for others. Mrs. Harper, a devoted mother who had dedicated her entire life to her family, never imagined that, at the age of 62, she would face a painful realization. Her happiness didn't always lie in self-sacrifice. Mrs. Harper recounted how, in her earlier years, her life revolved entirely around caring for her family, especially her only son, Chris. From the time Chris was a little boy, she and her husband, Mr. Harper, scrimped and saved to give him the best they could. Fancy clothes and delicious meals for themselves were luxuries she happily passed up to ensure Chris never felt he had less than his peers. When Chris grew up and started a family of his own, Mrs. Harper even sold the small house she and her husband had built over a lifetime so that Chris could afford a larger, more comfortable home. But her sacrifices weren't met with gratitude. Mrs. Harper realized this painfully when Chris and his family went on 3 consecutive vacations without inviting her. The first time, she told herself they might have wanted her to rest. The second time, her heart ached, but she convinced herself it was an oversight. By the third time, when Chris invited his in-laws but left her behind, she couldn't bear the hurt any longer. It wasn't just the exclusion. It was the sense that Chris and his family had begun to see her as irrelevant, a forgotten piece of their lives. That was when Mrs. Harper made a decision she'd never dared to consider before. One morning, as Chris and his family prepared for yet another trip, she quietly packed her own suitcase. Instead of staying home, waiting for them to return, she used the small amount of money she had left and planned a trip for herself. It wasn't to luxurious resorts or fancy hotels, just a peaceful little town where she could enjoy the quiet, reconnect with nature, and rediscover herself. Something extraordinary happened during that trip. For the first time in her life, Mrs. Harper felt light and unburdened. She no longer worried about what Chris needed, what her grandchildren wanted, or how to help with their mortgage payments. She woke up every day feeling free, savoring simple but fulfilling breakfasts, strolling along cobblestone streets, and chatting with strangers whose kindness felt refreshingly genuine. In that serene little town, she realized that happiness didn't have to come from giving unconditionally. Sometimes, it comes from pausing to care for yourself. When she returned home, Mrs. Harper was no longer the quiet, accommodating mother she had always been. She decided to stop financially supporting Chris, not because she didn't love him, but because she understood that dependence wouldn't help him grow. She began to focus on loving herself, starting with small but meaningful acts, cooking meals she enjoyed, reading the books she had set aside for years, and even taking up yoga to maintain her health. She realized that to love others in a healthy way, she first had to love herself. When Chris called to complain that she wasn't helping with his mortgage payments anymore, she calmly but firmly replied, "I've done everything I could for you. Now it's time for me to live for myself." Her newfound strength surprised her family, but it also made them pause and reflect. After some time, Chris began to understand that his mother's love wasn't something to be taken for granted. For the first time in his life, he truly appreciated all that she had done for him. Mrs. Harper didn't just reclaim her happiness. She inspired a deeper value, respect. She didn't need extravagant thank yous or grand gestures from her family. What she sought, and eventually earned, was a simple acknowledgement that she was a person worthy of love and respect. Her story isn't just a message for mothers. It's a wake-up call for all of us. Happiness doesn't lie in unconditional sacrifice. Sometimes, to truly love others, we must first learn to love ourselves. Only when we recognize our own worth can we live fully, without needing validation from anyone else. In Mrs. Harper's serene gaze, we see not just the passage of time, but a profound lesson on how to live and love with intention. The story of the Henderson family, the consequences of spoiling children. When people talk about the Henderson family, their story often evokes both sympathy and frustration. Mr. and Mrs. Henderson, now in their later years, should have been enjoying the peace they had worked so hard for. Instead, they found themselves trapped in a cycle of debt for one seemingly simple reason: indulging their children. The Hendersons had 2 sons, with their eldest, Eric, being the family's greatest hope. When Eric was accepted into a private university in a major city, their small home was filled with both pride and worry. The tuition was steep, $15,000 a year, not including living expenses. Despite Eric's mediocre academic performance and their modest financial situation, he was determined to attend. When Mrs. Henderson suggested a more affordable school, Eric scoffed, saying, "I don't want people to look down on me. What future would I have graduating from a second-rate college?" Eric's words pierced his parents' hearts. His pride, his dreams, these became their top priority. Despite Mr. Henderson's recent health issues and mounting medical bills, the couple scrambled to borrow money from family, friends, and even neighbors to cover Eric's first year of tuition. "As long as he gets a good education, we don't mind struggling a bit," Mrs. Henderson tearfully confided to my mother during one of her many trips to ask for loans. But the hope they placed in Eric wasn't met with gratitude or hard work. During his first year in college, Eric didn't make any effort to find a part-time job to ease his family's financial burden. Instead, he spent most of his time playing video games, hanging out with friends, and frequently asking his parents for more money, always with excuses. When my mother asked Mrs. Henderson why they didn't confront him, she replied with a weak smile, "He's at an age where he needs freedom. If we push too hard, he might drop out." In the years that followed, nothing changed. Eric continued to demand more money, and the Hendersons sank deeper into debt. Each time they visited friends or relatives to ask for help, Mrs. Henderson avoided eye contact, her voice hesitant and apologetic. Some people pitied them and lent them more, while others outright refused. Over time, the once respected couple became a subject of gossip in their neighborhood. Once admired for their hardworking nature, they were now pitied for their desperation. The breaking point came when Eric graduated and moved back home. The Hendersons hoped he would find a well-paying job and help them repay the mountain of debt they had accumulated for his education. Instead, Eric searched for an easy, low-stress job with little regard for salary. When his parents tried to urge him to take his responsibilities seriously, he retorted, "I didn't go to college to take any random job. I want something that suits me. I'm not going to spend my life suffering like you two did." Those words cut deep. Mr. and Mrs. Henderson, once so full of hope and love for their son, could only sit in silence, overwhelmed by disappointment and helplessness. The Henderson story isn't unique. It serves as a stark reminder of how love, when lacking guidance and boundaries, can lead to painful consequences. Eric never intended to become a burden to his family, but his parents' indulgence shielded him from understanding the value of hard work, the sacrifices they made, and the true meaning of gratitude. Perhaps the saddest part of the story is how, in their efforts to provide for Eric, the Hendersons lost their own sense of pride. Once confident and respected, they now avoided eye contact with their community and spoke of their son with a mix of regret and sorrow, as if they alone bore the blame for his lack of responsibility. Looking back, what the Hendersons might have done differently wasn't to indulge Eric's every demand, but to set firm boundaries. Children need to learn independence and accountability. From the start, Eric had understood that paying for college was a shared family effort. He might have worked harder and appreciated their sacrifices more. Equally important, the Hendersons needed to recognize that love doesn't mean sacrificing everything. By setting limits and teaching their children the value of self-reliance, parents can provide a different, more lasting gift: the tools to navigate life with responsibility and gratitude. In their story, we find a cautionary tale, not just for parents, but for anyone who believes that love means giving without limits, independence and responsibility in old age. When we think about old age, the familiar image often comes to mind of a father or mother sitting quietly on the porch, their hands weathered with time, still holding on to their final worries for their children and grandchildren. Perhaps there's nothing more unsettling for an elderly person than the fear of becoming a burden to those they love. This is why independence, especially financial independence, becomes crucial, not just to preserve their dignity, but also to maintain harmony in family relationships. Imagine yourself as Mr. Taylor, a 75-year-old man who values his independence. He understands that peace of mind doesn't come from handing over his assets entirely to his children, but from retaining control over his own life. Mr. Taylor began planning for his retirement early, not just by saving money in the bank, but by acquiring income-generating assets, such as a rental property. The steady income from this property covers his living expenses, giving him a sense of purpose and ensuring he doesn't have to rely entirely on his children. Mr. Taylor's financial independence is not only a practical decision, but also a deeply psychological one. He avoids situations where his children might argue over his assets or feel burdened by his care. To prevent any conflicts, he carefully drafted a will, outlining the distribution of his assets to ensure transparency and fairness. "I'm not doing this because I don't trust my children," he once said. "I'm doing it so they don't have to worry about me or each other." However, not everyone has the clarity and courage of someone like Mr. Taylor. Many elderly individuals, out of excessive love for their children or fear of losing familial bonds, choose to transfer all their assets while they're still mentally capable. Unfortunately, this can sometimes lead to heartbreaking outcomes, as their sacrifices become sources of conflict and insecurity. Children might begin to take their parents' support for granted, overlooking the fact that their parents still need care, respect, and attention. The most important lesson from Mr. Taylor's story isn't just about financial management, but about redefining his role in the family. He doesn't rely on his children, but also doesn't distance himself from them. He joins family dinners, takes an active interest in his children's lives, but keeps a personal space for himself. This balance allows him to maintain the respect of his children while encouraging them to grow and become independent themselves. From Mr. Taylor's example, we see the profound value of independence. It's not just about preparing for the later years of life, but also about expressing love in a thoughtful and sustainable way. He teaches his children that while familial love is priceless, all relationships thrive on mutual respect. His independence has become the greatest lesson, not just for the elderly, but for all of us. At any age, the ability to take care of oneself is one of the best ways to love and support those around us. Teaching children gratitude. Deep in the hearts of every parent lies a simple yet profound wish: to see their children grow up happy, fulfilled, and appreciative of all they have. Yet, sometimes, boundless love can lead to mistakes, preventing children from learning one of life's most important lessons: gratitude. I'll never forget the story of my mother's old friend, Mrs. Susan, a woman who dedicated her youth to building a happy family. Susan embodied sacrifice. In her younger years, she worked tirelessly from dawn to dusk to provide for her two sons. Time for herself was almost non-existent, and her personal joys were always secondary to the needs and desires of her children. She didn't hesitate to sell her cherished motorbike to pay for tuition or part with the precious jewelry her husband gave her on their wedding day to ensure her boys had the best opportunities. But over time, Susan realized that kindness, when unaccompanied by teaching, could be a double-edged sword. Her sons, growing up in an environment of unconditional giving, began to take her sacrifices for granted. During college, they frequently demanded pocket money or expensive gadgets, never once considering their family's financial struggles. Once, when Susan gently suggested her eldest son take a part-time job to help ease the burden, he dismissed her, saying, "It's your responsibility to support me. I'm not earning yet, so don't make me suffer." Those words cut deep. Susan didn't blame her sons. She understood that the fault also lay in her parenting. She had always believed that her children shouldn't have to endure the hardships she had faced. But in shielding them from difficulties, she had denied them the chance to learn resilience, appreciate effort, and understand the value of what they received. Gratitude doesn't come naturally, it must be nurtured through small, meaningful lessons. Susan recalled an incident when her youngest son accidentally broke her favorite porcelain mug. Instead of scolding him, she gently said, "Did you know it took me 3 days of saving to buy that mug? It's okay, but please be more careful next time." Those words planted a seed. From that day forward, her son began thinking twice before asking for anything, often wondering, how hard did mom work to provide this? Gratitude isn't just about feeling thankful for others. It's about understanding the value of effort. Children who don't learn to appreciate their parents' sacrifices often grow up to demand more, judge more harshly, and sometimes even take what they have for granted. To teach gratitude, parents must instill in their children an appreciation for even the smallest blessings. A warm meal, a thoughtful gift, or simply time spent together. Each moment is an opportunity to sow the seeds of understanding and respect. Gratitude also goes beyond material things. It involves recognizing unseen sacrifices. I once heard a father explain to his son why his mother often came home late. He said, "Every time your mom works overtime, she's giving up time with you to make sure you have everything you need. Thank her for that, because it's not something she has to do. It's something she chooses to do out of love." Sometimes, parents believe that providing everything for their children is enough, but without helping them understand the cost and value of those efforts, children may grow up indifferent. Gratitude not only makes children kinder and more empathetic, but also strengthens the family bond. A child who says thank you, who values what they've been given, will never intentionally hurt those who've sacrificed for them. Teaching gratitude requires pairing love with guidance. And sometimes, that means being firm. Not every request should be fulfilled, and not every mistake should go without consequences. Saying no isn't a lack of love, it's an expression of it. Gratitude flourishes when children learn that not everything is readily available and that anything worthwhile requires effort. Encourage children to find joy in simple things and to say thank you daily. Gratitude not only helps them appreciate their parents, but also teaches them to live a meaningful life, one where every blessing is received with deep appreciation. By doing so, love becomes a source of strength, not a burden, and the family truly becomes a place of belonging, not just for children, but also for the parents who gave them everything. Health is the greatest wealth. It's often said that a person's greatest treasure isn't gold or riches, but their health. As we age, this statement becomes even more meaningful. No matter how much money we have or how much love we receive from our family, our remaining days only truly matter if we maintain a healthy body to enjoy them. I remember visiting Mrs. Ellen, the oldest neighbor in our community. At nearly 80 years old, she was remarkably fit, her posture upright, her eyes bright, and her voice clear. While many her age relied on canes or spent their days confined to bed, Mrs. Ellen still cooked for herself, tended to her lovely garden, and occasionally walked to the local market for groceries. When I asked her secret, she simply smiled and said, "It's nothing extraordinary. I just eat moderately, sleep well, and don't let myself worry too much." Achieving such balance, however, isn't easy for everyone. As we grow older, our bodies naturally weaken. Conditions like diabetes, high blood pressure, and osteoporosis often make their appearance. Sadly, many don't realize that the foods they consume daily are among the biggest culprits contributing to their declining health. Take my friend Mr. Henry as an example. He was always healthy, but after retiring, his eating habits didn't change. He continued to eat white rice, bread, and greasy fast food as staples in his diet. While his younger body could handle such a routine, aging made it harder for his system to cope. Within a few years, he experienced rising blood sugar levels, uncontrollable weight gain, and frequent numbness in his limbs. By the time he visited his doctor, he was warned to immediately adjust his diet and lifestyle or face serious health complications like diabetes. Mr. Henry's story is not uncommon. Many seniors maintain the same eating habits they had when they were younger, unaware that their aging bodies require different, more nutrient-dense foods. Consuming excessive amounts of white rice, refined bread, and other processed carbs can lead to spikes in blood sugar, insulin resistance, obesity, and heart disease. Instead, switching to foods like brown rice, whole grain bread, corn, and legumes can provide energy while delivering fiber and vitamins, supporting better digestion and reducing health risks. A neighbor of mine, Mrs. Grace, is a shining example of how change can make a difference. A few years ago, she was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes and advised to change her diet. Initially hesitant, having grown up eating white rice daily, she eventually gave it a try after her doctor explained its importance. She started reducing her intake of white rice, replacing it with brown rice, whole grains, and more vegetables. She also cut back on sweets, opting for fresh fruit instead. Within months, she felt lighter, her blood sugar stabilized, and her health checkups became less stressful. What we eat doesn't just fuel our bodies, it defines the quality of our lives. For seniors, whose digestion and nutrient absorption slow with age, it's crucial to consume foods that are both easy to digest and packed with nutrition. Simple meals like millet porridge, cornbread, or yogurt can be both delicious and beneficial. Adding fiber from whole grains, fruits, and vegetables supports a healthy digestive system and reduces common issues like constipation. But diet is only part of the equation. Holistic health also requires regular physical activity and mental well-being. I once met an elderly gentleman at the park who walked every morning without fail. When I asked him why, he replied, "Walking keeps me young, not just my body but my mind too. Our bodies are like trees. Without water and sunlight, even the richest soil can't help them grow strong." His words ring true. Health isn't just about avoiding illness. It's about being able to fully enjoy every day. Maintaining a healthy body isn't just a responsibility to ourselves, but also a priceless gift to our loved ones. When we're healthy, we can spend more time with them, create more memories, and share more moments. Among all the things we can control, health is the most worthy investment. A nutritious diet, consistent exercise, and a calm mind are the keys to unlocking a joyful, fulfilling old age. So, love your body and care for it as you would a close friend. Only with good health can we truly appreciate the value of every moment in life. Lessons and conclusion. In every person's life, true wealth isn't just material possessions, it's also the values we carry, our sense of self-worth, and the love we share. The stories of Mr. Taylor, Mrs. Grace, and the Henderson family all highlight a profound message. Wisdom in managing assets and fostering independence are keys to maintaining peace in our later years. Entrusting your entire fortune to your children without a clear plan not only risks losing control, but can also sow seeds of conflict within the family. Mr. Taylor chose to manage his finances independently, drafting a will that ensured fairness and transparency. His decision not only safeguarded his future, but also preserved harmony among his children. Mrs. Grace's story underscores the importance of learning to love yourself. She once believed her happiness depended on her children, but when their actions lacked gratitude, she decided to change. She began living for herself, savoring life's simple joys, and stopped making unconditional sacrifices. This transformation not only brought her joy, but also prompted her son to reflect on and appreciate all that she had done for him. The Henderson family serves as a cautionary tale of how blind love can lead to dependency and irresponsibility in children. When parents cater to every demand without teaching self-reliance, they not only place themselves in difficult situations, but also risk raising entitled and ungrateful children. Mrs. Henderson realized that to truly help her children grow, she needed to say no at the right times and set boundaries so they could learn accountability. A child raised to value gratitude grows into a kind, thoughtful adult who understands the worth of what they have. Buddhism teaches us that suffering arises from attachment. People often cling to their possessions, relationships, or expectations for their children to behave a certain way, forgetting that all things are impermanent. When you place too much hope or demand on your children, you not only burden yourself but also create invisible pressure on them. Buddhist philosophy reminds us that true peace comes from letting go of these mental burdens. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means accepting that everything has its time and place. Once you've fulfilled your role as a parent, allow your children to walk their own paths. By embracing life's impermanence, you can appreciate every moment, live fully, and find serenity. The peace of old age doesn't come from amassing wealth or controlling everything. It comes from knowing how to care for yourself. A clear financial plan can alleviate worries about the future. Maintaining your health through mindful eating and regular exercise allows you to enjoy each day to the fullest. Most importantly, learn to let go of what's beyond your control. When you release the burdens in your heart, you'll discover a lightness and tranquility that no amount of money can buy. Ask yourself, what are you truly living for? Are you trading your peace of mind for the expectations others have placed on you? Take a moment to pause, breathe deeply, and reflect on your life. Perhaps it's time to focus on yourself, to love yourself more, and to live for yourself. Life is short, and old age isn't the end. It's an opportunity to begin a new journey, one that leads to inner peace and contentment. By living each day to the fullest, you not only bring happiness to yourself but also radiate that joy to those around you. This is the greatest gift you can give to yourself and the world. You see, old age isn't the sad ending of a book. It's a new chapter for those who learn to live wisely. The stories of individuals like Mr. Allen, Ms. Grace, or Auntie May don't just teach us how to protect our resources, but also remind us that loving yourself is the first step toward living a meaningful life. Health is the most precious wealth, and inner peace is the ultimate goal. So why not choose a life of independence? Cherish what we have, and spend time doing what makes our hearts truly sing. Take a moment to reflect and ask yourself, am I truly living for myself? Or am I clinging to things that were never really mine? Only by learning to let go can we find true freedom. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If today's lessons resonated with you, share them with the people you love. And remember, life becomes more beautiful when we learn to live each day to the fullest. I look forward to seeing you in future stories, where we'll continue to explore the deeper values of life. Don't forget to follow along as we embark on this journey of savoring life to its fullest.